Hey guys, welcome to the Game Dev Discussion Podcast. I'm your host, Alex Beddoes. This is episode 30. We've got a very special guest. We've got lead texture artist of 343, Rogelio Olguin. How are you doing, dude?
Hey, hi, how's it going?
I'm good, thank you. I'm still under the weather, unfortunately, but I appreciate, it's been a bit of a back and forth to get this sorted out because time zones are a bitch to work with.
Yeah, for sure.
But
should I introduce myself?
Please go ahead. It'd be good to just hear if you could summarize as well about what lead texture artist means, because I know it's something people maybe not so aware of.
Yeah, so now I'm at 343, a really cool company here in Washington, and I'm a lead texture artist, specifically lead surfacing. It's actually not lead texturing. There's a difference in that, I guess you could say, but I think that we can talk about the differences later. But with lead surfacing, what it means for us, at least, is that we're part of a texturing and also material workflows when it comes to all 343. We try to help out, everybody from environments to characters, even effects occasionally if that's necessary and stuff like that. So it's not just concentrating on environments like, let's say, other companies that kind of hone in to just environment work. So that's basically the gist of it. And for me, the team kind of formed before I got into 343. It was already pre-formed with 3 people, mainly Shio and Chris Lewis, and then James Ritosa, who was a contractor early on. And then at some point, they decided to contact me, and basically it all went well, and now I'm here. And after I got to 343, which was like a year ago, now we're a team of 9 people. So, and we have other texture artists or surfacing artists that work in specifically like Biome's team, but they're considered a different team.
Okay. You still there, dude? You've cut out.
What?
Okay. There we go. You're back. You cut out for a sec.
Yeah. So I was saying that we have a really good crew of kind of like texturing and surfacing at 343, and right now we're at a good stage where we're like, okay, we got what we need, and we're seeing where we need to grow, but for now we're good.
So when you talk about the need to grow, this brings us quite nicely on to the next topic. But what do you think about when you're trying to grow the team? Like, is there such a thing as you need a particular type of materials artist, because you're already in a niche of art anyway, because you're a materials artist or a surfaces artist? But do you have to then go even deeper and go, right, we need a very particular type of surfacing artist right now? Or when you're sort of casting a net out, is it like we just need a very good materials artist?
Yeah, and every single person that I have, in the surfacing team is very different. Like, there's different needs and different, almost like skill sets that I've been looking for. It's all a balance at the end. Like, I have some people in the team that are extremely technical and know how to do, even code materials to do materials in this and like node graphs type stuff like Unreal. And also know the nitty gritty of the Substance Designer, workflows, and making sure that we can make tools within Substance Designer, so that we have like really technical, and then we have what I'll call, the more artistic, raw artist, texture artist. And so we have a good divide of those, and really it really depends on the needs at the moment of who I'm kind of like looking for. Currently, we're not looking for anybody in particular because we're pretty full up for this project. We've been really lucky to hire a really, really good team, and I'm super excited to see what they do and where they go.
Okay, so put a hypothetical hat on. If you were, if when you are sort of recruiting or when you're looking at an artist, a materials artist, this is gonna be quite interesting because this ties into sort of like, I suppose, our station, since that's the main portfolio place. You open up someone's portfolio, like what are you looking for as an experienced materials artist? What things stand out to you? Because obviously you're going to be met with probably a ton of material balls or material planes. So what are you like? You with your eye, like what certain things are you looking for, or what stands out to you in a materials artist?
I think one of the things that stands out is kind of like a person that's done a little bit of everything. And it's interesting because I see a lot of younger artists are definitely going to just, I want to be a texture artist, and that's cool, that's fine. But there's so much more to texturing than just texturing in substance. Placing it in the engine, making sure that the tangent normals are correct, that everything's baked correctly, the world space normals, all that stuff, to object space normals. So it could go like super technical and knowledge based, and also it's just going back to like environment stuff, knowing how to place textures, blend textures, and make a clear reads for what the environments are. So when looking for people, generally I try to find people that already done environment art in the past and kind of just decided to concentrate more on texturing. So that's the first thing I look for. Really is either a person who's done a lot of props, has done modeling and texturing, and or a person who's done like a lot of environment stuff already. And there's the rare case where the texture artist is just that amazing, and it'll be like, okay, that I'm definitely gonna get that person, right? But usually I like to get a mix, and it's been so far it's been because of that criteria, it's actually been a really good team we've developed, because in general they can handle a lot of different things as we go, and not just be stuck in kind of like I'm making a texture, I'm placing it, and I'm going to let somebody else blend it, or something like that. There's a lot of issues that come up, and it's one of those things that through that experience you get. So it's more like a person who has like at least 2 to 3 years of game dev experience kind of thing. It's usually kind of a good sign, and they went from environment art to texturing.
So you think that's because it just allows, because obviously when you're doing like material art or surfacing in general, you're supplying stuff that other people are going to use. The reason I'm guessing the reason you like to see environments is because the person has to have an appreciation for the end product. Because I know it's like it's easy to be stuck in designer and marmoset for a few months where you're churning out materials, but if you're only in designer and marmoset, you never see it in situation.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, if you're only in Marmoset, you're only going to get beautiful renders, and that's the thing. Sometimes you don't have all those bells and whistles that make it beautiful. I mean, you can almost make almost any. It's debatable, of course, but almost any texture you make in Substance look great in Marmoset, just because the render's so good.
Yeah, I do agree.
But it takes a lot to actually make a good texture look great, even if you don't have displacement, even if you don't have like screen space shadowing or other bells and whistles. It just adds to it. Like Moss, sometimes you just don't have for now. You just don't have those nice effects. But you have to mimic it. You have to kind of push it. You have to kind of get the look, and that could be either playing with roughness or kind of like breaking the rules a little bit. And those are ways, those are things you don't know until you actually start seeing it in game, and start to work with the lighting team, work with the modelers, and really hone in to what you're really trying to get. And just seeing it in a vacuum is just not very good.
Well, it's funny you mentioned as the like Moss is the example. Like sometimes you basically have to do stuff which technically doesn't make sense, like roughness values which are clearly wrong, just to achieve certain things. I'm currently in a problem in production at the moment where we haven't got access to subsurface scattering, so I've got to fake it with like some weird roughness values. And it's like, it's that sort of thing which I don't think, because like I said, in Marmoset, you don't have problems. It has all the bells and whistles to solve any problem you would have.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you were like encountering, is there any materials which you think are strong ones for people to like look at to show a range of skills? Because I was thinking about this when I think about. I was talking to Ben Wilson about it. It's like there's certain materials which people do a lot of, so stuff like brick or whatever it might be, because they're just they're logical stepping stone. And when I was doing a material where I was leveraging Marvelous Designer, and at first I was like, this is cheating, this isn't really right. And then he was like, his point was, well, you're showing your understanding of the software by using something else. That's like that's you showing understanding. And then that made me think about, well, what materials actually do that? What materials really show an experienced person you understand this piece of software? Because again, I don't like cliff faces, because cliff faces I feel like you can hide behind noise and cracks in these big dramatic shapes.
Yeah.
So I was just curious, from you, with your experience, like, is there any materials that you think show an artist's ability very, very well?
So I think one of the ones that I've experienced lately that's been really hard, it's like grass. It sounds simple, but it's like, okay, if you really want to get good looking grass, I mean, you can technically go scan it, right? And but if you want to make a little bit more stylized grass, but still doesn't have the I don't know if you've seen when you make grass in Substance, you get kind of like a weird beveling on the edges.
Yes.
And that's not necessarily what happens with grass. You kind of have a cutoff, a much more defined cutoff. So one of those things is like, you just can't really make good grass in Substance. And I know I'm probably going to... people are like, no, you can probably make good grass. I'm like, no, well, yeah, if you look up close, you'll see those bevelings, and they'll look kind of weird.
Yeah.
I think you honestly have to go into Zbrush or into Maya and create the grass strands and bake it down if you want to go and make good grass. So it's one of those things that, yeah, okay, you can get maybe 70% there. You can kind of fake it. People will be like, it looks fine. But with a trained eye, you'll definitely see those bevels, and it'll just kind of look weird. It doesn't look natural.
So it's just being able to sort of know the limitations know the software so well that you know the limitations to say, right, it's better I do this in, like you said, in Maya or in ZBrush and take it back in.
Yeah, exactly, and it's also about speed too. Like if it's to make grass look really good in Substance Designer, you have to make so many different shapes and clumps to get it. While it might actually be easier to just go into a good old, Maya paint effects and, put in some quick grass in there and bake it down. And so it's like, remembering, and that's the thing, a lot of people just don't know that we have Maya paint effects, because it's like, it's garbage. It's, for most cases, it's garbage, right? But it's good garbage when you use it right. So it's one of those things like, oh yeah, that's hidden now in the 2018 or 2019, whatever Maya. But it's still useful, and you can still find those moments where I'm like, oh god, I feel really bad for using effects, paint effects, but you know what? It's working better than my Substance grass.
So what about like so that's like an insight to like when you're hiring. Once you get, and this is a question which we were speaking about off air, and it won't see brought up, but it's actually a really interesting point in that, how do you train a materials artist? You have a new materials artist land in your studio. What skills are you trying to sort of teach the artist? Because when you think of like environment art in general, a lot of people I think have a pretty good understanding of what skills you need to learn when you're getting into the studio. With materials art, you sort of, if you're getting hired as a materials artist, you already know the software pretty well, otherwise you wouldn't be there, and all this kind of stuff. So as a lead, you're a new materials artist, what sort of things what's the training situation? How does that take place?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on each person, of course, but generally I'm less interested of the kind of knowledge base of the programs, because that kind of comes naturally as you work.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more interested in the artistic part of things and making sure that the textures are coming out of the
Oh, just let you know that you cut out again. So when you come back, there we go. You're back. You're back.
yeah
You're back.
yeah the textures are coming from the artist. Generally, what I'm looking for is kind of more of the artistic value of it, and what that means, it could mean a whole lot of things, especially if you're depending on the art direction of the game, etc. But what it means to me is that the textures have a good balance, have a good read, had from large to medium to small details, to a good variation of colors and tone, and as well it tiles well, because that's the thing. At the end, the materials have to work well in different occurrences from
Mm-hmm.
large to small areas or surfaces. So you have to make sure that they tile well and then they feel well, in that sense. So it's a lot of kind of just the art direction kind of pushes, like clarity, making sure that everything's sits well in the world, and then where you do need areas that are more I guess noisy, you can allow that, but it depends on balance. You have to have a balance of like noise and rest. So
Yeah.
it's a lot of that kind of going on, and it really is more on the artistic side, the training or guidance that I give as a texture lead.
So you've obviously you've been around the block a bit. Is there any like pitfalls you see? So them stuff you're talking about, making sure the micro and the macro reads well, visual rest, and all this sort of stuff. Is there any recurring pitfalls you see within new materials artists, should I say?
Yeah, one of the pitfalls I see a lot is that first, a lot of people take really long on textures because they're very precious about them. They want to make every single texture amazing.
Guilty.
And sometimes you don't need to. You just need to have the basic dirt, and that's it. Just give me a dirt with a few pebbles. The pebbles, they could even be penetrating themselves, and I'll be fine. It's a matter of how it blends all together. So, not seeing it in game early on and not seeing how it blends is probably the biggest pitfall I see for texture artists, is that they're not getting it in game quick enough, and you're not seeing the effect.
Yeah.
Of the world.
Well, I think it's also like I've started the more I've worked in it, the more I've started to feel like there's a parallel between textures and UI or typography, in a sense that you don't notice good textures. You they blend into the world, and you just read the world as the world. The same with UI. You don't notice good UI. You don't notice good typography. But
exactly.
When you see bad typography or bad UI or bad textures, they stand out like a sore thumb.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's probably part of the issue, is that if you're not looking at an engine or looking at it in game, should I say, you're not seeing if it is the sore thumb or if it just blends in the way you want it to.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the number one thing, and it's a continuous struggle. That's probably one of the continuous struggles in any studio, is trying to get things in game as quickly as possible, because at the end, it doesn't matter if that one, for modeling, if that one bucket is like the perfect bucket. It just matters that it's a bucket.
Yeah.
It looks like a bucket. You're gonna run past it probably, in less than a second, and you're not even gonna pay attention to it because you're gonna have gunshots or whatever happen in game that you're not gonna care. It just has to kind of resemble what it is, and that's it. So it's a matter of knowing what is absolutely needed for the scene, and letting go a little bit too, and just being like, okay, this isn't enough, and we can move on to the next areas.
You think that whole letting go thing, though? Do you think that's something that maybe comes with the sort of experience side of it? Because I know for me, for example, it's like you said, the whole being precious about your art. It's very much like you just want it to look as good as possible, and you want it to just be amazing. And when you've, I suppose, got experience, is like, look, we're just in production. It's easy to look good. We need to just get a job done.
Yeah,
that's part of it, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's part of the experience for sure. You gain that as you work more and more, and just being in the industry and just working on projects, year after year, you start realizing where you can cut those corners without it being affecting the general look, right? And yeah, I can appreciate that would take long for somebody who's newer to understand. So that's where I kind of come in now. I kind of have to be like, hey, you can move on, by the way.
Does it ever frustrate you though? Like because obviously you're an artist. Does that side of the industry, the fact that look, cut corners, we've got to get the job done, that whole mentality, does that ever grind on yourself as an artist? I know you're a lead and you've got the experience, but do you ever think you don't want to cut the corner, you just want to make the art good? Like, does that ever affect you personally very much?
Oh no, I mean, I still consider that I have a really high level of want to get it to a high level of finish. There's a difference of getting a high level of finish on one asset versus getting a whole level of finish on an entire environment.
True.
And that's the thing. If we go quicker on making a full on environment section, and then we get all the things that we need, all the bells and whistles of the environment, then we can have time and go back and analyze what's actually needed to bring up to snuff. You won't really know that unless you build the whole environment.
Yeah, that's true. It's kind of a weird one, isn't it? Because you have to sort of have it all there, and then you can actually see what's not fitting into the jigsaw, so to speak.
Yeah, and it's a tough one. It's a tough one for newer artists to understand because they haven't really experienced that as often. But that's one thing that I would say is pretty high quality when it comes to at Naughty Dog, is that they work very much like that, and they try to just get everything in as quickly as possible. And at the end, obviously they have every environment in Naughty Dog's polished to the T, right? Even to the extreme notion of even other companies. But either way, it's just one of those things that they try to get as much as possible really quickly. Yeah. And then go back and polish and then add the extra little bits that make it shine.
So let's talk about time. Actually, this sort of ties back a little bit back into people applying. One of the big so I agree. I've always said with materials, it's good. I say more see them in engine. I like to see the shader and them in engine whenever I'm looking at a materials artist. Now we'll take it a step further. What you're suggesting, it's good to see scenes and environments and actual, them in practice. One of the big counterpoints whenever I spoke to people about this is, that's very time intensive. That's very time intensive. I could get 10 materials during the time it takes me to make an environment. Sure. As a A/B option, would you prefer to see an environment with 3 good materials, or would you prefer to see 10 materials?
Well, I mean, I'd vote for quality on your portfolio, obviously. And if it's for just a couple materials, you don't have to make the most, large looking environment to get across that how to blend and how to balance. I mean, having a small diorama per your texture swatches that you're making, it's more than enough. If you really are focusing on textures, it's just having a small diorama, and a small diorama can literally be just a really good place, playing with some shadows, some good lighting, kind of like what Josh Lynch does, or Daniel Theiger, etc. I do that sometimes with my environment stuff or my material stuff. I add a little bit of here's some geo with the cliffs and stuff like that, and it makes a difference. It gives it context, and it also makes it seem like it's a world, and you're actually thinking about how these shapes can interact with actual geometry.
See, that's interesting.
It doesn't have to be a huge environment. Now, I would recommend at least, if it's a newer person, I would say kind of 1 or 2 environments that have more materials placed in there, so it's a full-on environment. But I wouldn't go and make 5 or 10 environments for a new person. I would just have maybe 2 environments, or maybe 1 really good one, and then some just texture bowls with smaller dioramas.
So what's quite interesting is with one of your recent materials, the towers. I'm seeing a lot of the experienced artists sort of do these types of materials, these sort of materials which are architectural, or not replacing modeling, but you know what I mean? Like you're using just a couple of planes and then you slap tessellation on and you've now got this big 3D geo building. And I've seen a lot of artists do that, and I think the reason being is, I think people are getting bored of looking at material balls.
Sure.
And I quite like them, although like I don't think that type of texturing will ever come into production, so to speak. We're not going to have a 200 poly building in the background. We're going to have a tessellated texture. Obviously, that's never going to happen. But it's you showing your understanding. It's you finding a new way to show off a texture.
Absolutely.
Is there anything else like that? What other ways are there to do that? Because I have to admit, although material balls are great because they're just probably the most efficient way to show off a texture and how light wraps around it and all this kind of stuff. These architectural pieces I'm seeing people do are a step forward in terms of how to show how robust the material is. And I quite like it. I like the idea of we're trying to push new things. And I saw you joking actually the other day with Javier on Facebook about it. What other ways are there? Because I've seen, there's a joke about the tourist knots, but I've seen Daniel doing a big long, veiny, cylindrical shapes, and that's one way of doing it. But have you put any thought into that?
Yeah, I mean, I just linked you right now with the Phoenix egg that I did. It's one of the recent ones, and I mean, it's a glorified sphere with a stand and a bird. So that's all it is. And it's relatively simple. I mean, the stand is basically just this kind of cylindrical shape, and then it's obviously being displaced. And the bird was more complex, but it's basically planes. So again, this is not practical. I wouldn't see this in game, but for a shot like this, it's kind of like just a beauty shot. It actually does tell me quite a bit, on composition. And it's just like, you're making your own art shots. It's a small scene. It's maybe 3 materials, treatments, and at the same time to get these shapes out of in Substance Designer, it can be relatively hard if you don't have the experience. So knowing displacement, knowing the height balance, and all those things. These are what I call kind of like the Daniel Theiger watch that he has, and the helmets that he made, and having other artists that do that kind of thing here and there. Even like the octopus one from there was
Eric Wiley.
Yeah, Eric Wiley.
That one's ridiculous.
That one's ridiculous. I'm still trying to figure out. And the thing is, it's funny because I know he has to download to see it, but I'm like, it's weird because I'm at this weird kind of level where I'm like, I don't want to know.
No,
I want to figure it out myself. I want to figure it out myself.
Well, so that's one of those things. It's being able to look at someone's art. I do this with material art, and it's one of the big deciding factors. Actually, something that Jeremy used to say about some of my older artwork is he shouldn't be able to work out how I modeled something. He said a few of my old pieces, look, I could see you did a bevel there, then you bridged it, then you did an inset, and I kind of treat design the same now. It's I look at the material, and one of the big deciding factors for me is I shouldn't be able to see the noise. I shouldn't recognize clouds too. Oh, that's the slope blur crack, or whatever. And I'm the same with Eric Wiley stuff. I'm I don't want to download it and ruin it for myself. I want to see if I can figure it out. It's that material is pretty bonkers. I won't lie. So would this sort of stuff though, if you saw an artist, you had a portfolio come on your desk, and someone did, let's say your piece you've just posted, the Phoenix. If you received this, you'd be like, damn, this person seriously knows how to use designer. Maybe not in situation, but they know this software well enough to create this.
Oh yeah. I mean, definitely. I mean, and it's funny because without looking at the resume of Eric Wiley or even Daniel Theiger, because he's mostly cleaned up his portfolio, which is material balls at this point. Then I would not know that he has a history as an environment artist and stuff like that unless I look at the resume. I would still hire those 2 people. I would be like, Eric Wiley, you know what? Yeah, of course, it makes sense. I mean, it's just that it's it goes from a different level that you're like, okay, there's a lot of understanding here. There's a lot of blends that are happening within that one texture that this can naturally go and expand to an environment. I don't think it would be that hard for them to understand that if they have no idea of how to do that, if they are just like literally just material ball presenters, which they're not. No. That's a difference. And again, it comes back to the whole thing, like Eric Wiley, Daniel Theiger, Josh Lynch, those kind of like top tier people out there. I don't, I would debate and say that I don't think they would have gotten that far to that extreme if they didn't know a whole bunch of like modeling techniques, compositional techniques, and balance techniques. And those come from their history of just being environment artists and prop artists in the past. I would say that a vanilla, and I'm probably gonna eat my words with certain people, but a vanilla just texture artist that's just making material balls would probably not reach that level, of finesse. And that's because these people have that history.
I have to admit, I had this conversation early on about. I can't remember who I was talking to now. But we were talking about like Javier. I think it's Javier. I completely forgot he did props and in environments. I just at the time I remembered him for materials he's putting out. And then when I think he was due to go on the podcast, I was looking through his portfolio. I was like, damn, I forgot this guy does all this. And same with, like I said, Daniel Theiger, like at the very bottom of his portfolio. And this is a whole different conversation because I don't think he treats ArtStation as a portfolio. Like it's his gallery to show his design experiments. But there is something to be said that because the majority of people do use ArtStation as a portfolio, material artists like will look to Daniel Theiger and go, oh, so that's what I got to do. And it's weird because it's like they don't, because obviously it's an experience thing, they're not aware that he's not using it as a portfolio. Whereas you look at your portfolio or like Josh's or Javier's, where they have all their environments and props, it's like you could see the track record of how they got there.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, and that's an important thing. Yeah, Daniel Theiger is definitely not using as a portfolio. It's just like experimental. Yeah. And probably the thing that makes him happy at the end of the day, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So he puts all that stuff in there because he's just like he's experimenting and not necessarily the stuff that's even styled to the current game he's working on. Like you can look at he's working on Bungie, and he's working with Destiny, and they're kind of similar in style, but you can see that he has his own style away from the Destiny franchise.
Yeah,
and it's actually his style is what he wants to do, and if they give him kind of like full on reign to, hey, this is exactly what texturing is in his mind, and they give him full reign of a project, he probably would go there. He probably would be like, I want to do this, I want to do my style in some way or another. So this is where he can explore and show his look and feel of things. So they're not necessarily catered to one thing or the other. It's just catered to him.
Yeah, I think he's shown his whole repertoire as well. Like his stylized stuff is. I love the clay renders because it reminds me of like old who is it? Michael Fasante. Like you see one of his grey textures, and then you see Daniel Theiger's like recent stylized stuff, and I'm like, if you told me that was Zbrush, I'd believe you. Like,
yeah,
and that's the stuff like he does quite a lot actually, which I quite like. Is you wouldn't believe sometimes what it is. Kind of actually like it's actually the exact same as what you're doing with your Phoenix Egg. It's like if you show me that render, it's that thing you don't jump to substance designer. If you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's not about the tool. It's how you use it. That's a cliche saying, but it's true.
Yeah.
And it's exactly. It could have been done in Zbrush, absolutely. It probably would have been easier to be done in Zbrush. I mean, considered in between of that, I was like, why am I going through the pain of doing this in Substance? And it comes down to the fact that, there's a lot of people out there that are kind of like, literally bulging their pecs. So like, oh, I can do this in Substance Designer. And, you want to be a little bit of that trend sometimes. And you're like, okay, I can do this too, kind of thing.
Well, it's good to show what you can do, remind people who the OG was. Well, actually, speaking of that, I haven't spoken to anyone about this yet, and I'm really curious to see what you have to say about it.
Yeah.
You were a texture artist during the time of, when Substance Design was coming on the scene. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what it was like being a texture artist during that time. What was the transition like? What actually was like, what made you actually take note of design and take it seriously?
I mean, for me, it was kind of when this happened was getting done with Last of Us initially at Naughty Dog. I was kind of like 6 months, I forget, like 5 months into the project at the tail end when I first got at Naughty Dog. And I was doing all my textures, traditionally Naughty Dog style, which is ZBrush, Photoshop, all that stuff, right? Back in the day, that was kind of like the number one workflow, and everybody who was making textures back in the day were making textures with ZBrush or Crazy Bump if you're crazy, but I still use Crazy Bump. I've used it. I think the last time I literally used it, I know we'll get back to that, but the last time I literally used it was probably 2 years ago. 2 years and a half ago. But I can actually point you to that one texture that's a Crazy Pump texture.
Please do, because I'm curious.
But regardless, it's so going back to the whole texturing thing for Substance. So it was a tail end of Last of Us, and then we were heading to Uncharted 4. And in between that time, obviously, a lot of people took breaks, and I was still kind of new in the company. So I decided, okay, I'm not going to take a break. I'm just going to kind of, just take it easy, just learn a few things. I wanted to explore some ZBrush stuff. But in the between of that stuff, one of the leads there said, hey, you should really, test out Substance Designer. If you have time, just feel free, install it. We have some licenses. We're still kind of figuring out if we really want to use it, full on and stuff like that. And prior to that, I already knew that, Brad Smith was using Substance Designer and testing it as well. So I already had somebody that could be like, hey, I can poke some information out as we go, right? Mm-hmm. So I installed it, and after like 3 weeks, I was hooked. There was basically no turning back at that point. And sure, after 3 weeks, I was able to get to a point where I was able to do like a basic cobblestone texture that was pretty close to something that I would do in ZBrush. Mm-hmm. There are still finesse issues, and I was still like, okay, I'm quite not there, but I feel like I can keep pushing on and get to that point, right? Mm-hmm. So, and that's what happened. Basically, after 3 weeks, I kept on pushing on, asking Brad Smith for tips and, learning just, as I go. And in the beginning, I was still introducing, sculpts from ZBrush and baking them down for height maps as well. So I wasn't strictly full on Substance. And so eventually, during that time, we started figuring out that, this tool was really amazing, and we needed to really invest more time into it. So we started making, documentation, videos, and not everybody at Naughty Dog was sold that Substance was going to be a thing for, Uncharted 4 or the foreseeable future, right? Mm-hmm. So it did take quite a bit of kind of like convincing through just, action and just making, textures, showing them, showing the artists at Naughty Dog. And then as more came on, then it just made it, simpler to convince the rest. But it really took, almost a full production to go from, maybe 10-15% of the artists using it to almost 80 or 90% people using it. So it There are still some outliers, but that's okay. That's how it is.
Yeah.
But at the end, the workflows went from internal to external. We had to make documentation for what outsourcing looked like and everything, and that was a lot of work just to get that going. Brad Smith did probably more than I did. I just did a couple things for that. Mm-hmm. So props to him and the outsourcing team. But it was an interesting experience, and actually, I would say that in many ways, Substance Designer actually opened me up for hey, I really, besides being an artist, I actually really like kind of the process of teaching people about stuff. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know that prior to that. Yeah, so I kind of started getting into that more and being kind of like a mentor and just kind of showing people new things, and then making some little tools in Substance, exploring those and seeing how people would use them, having those aha moments, and then just working closer with the team, and then working with outsourcing, working with other external teams and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So it really kind of I went from just being kind of a general artist to kind of being more of a, oh wow, there's more to this development thing going on, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the hell out of it. It was really fun, and it sure added quite a bit more stress on things that I needed to do.
Yeah,
but it was fine. I quite enjoyed it, and Uncharted 4 basically went from no Substance to full on Substance, and then after that, basically Naughty Dog's been using Substance since then. And I mean, from what it appeared to be is when Uncharted 4 kind of got complete and the news came out that basically it was almost a full on Substance project. Mm-hmm. And then the word spread like wildfire. And then there's other groups that are already working on it, but I would like to say that Naughty Dog probably pushed it the biggest.
They put it on the map, didn't it? Really.
And then everybody just was like, oh god, we gotta really get into Substance Designer or Painter. A huge thing.
Right, and okay, so you've gone through that. Now, I'm curious to see what your thoughts on what we're doing now then with the industry, with the whole stuff moving towards photoscans. Mm-hmm. Now, you've already gone through that iteration of Zbrush to Designer, and I imagine yourself had pushback on that, initially. Where do you sit at the moment? What's your thoughts on what photoscan is, within the context of texture artists?
So I think initially, a lot of people that were texture artists, the initial feeling of photoscans was like, oh, that's going to take our job away if we're doing a realistic kind of, a realistic type world, or or art direction, mm-hmm. Art directed game. But at the end, I don't think that happened at all. What really happened is that it became a resource. So yes. I mean, sure, we have mega scans, and we have, obviously, you can go out and scan your own things and create your own library. But that's what it became more to me, and that's what's becoming more, at least very true and currently at 343. So we're using, occasionally some scans and stuff like that. And they're basically just resources. At the end, the ones that are mixing it in are, the texture artists putting it together, and you have what I would call a good balance of procedural methods to, scan-based methods in there. And it's funny because back in the day, which was really a year or two, I was like, oh no, I'm not going to go into a scan thing at all, right? Mm-hmm. But now that the mindset has become more like, oh, it's just a resource, and I'm just using those height maps to kind of accentuate things. Mm-hmm. And make my life easier, and make my teams life easier too. Then by all means, let's do it. I mean, we still have textures. Some textures that are completely full procedural, right? And that's fine, as long as it fits in the art direction.
So, do you buy into the narrative at all of like, oh, give it another 5 years and the need for a texture artist has disappeared because of procedurality? Do you buy into that whatsoever, or is it like, no, that's people misinterpreting what the tool is for?
Yeah, I mean, at the end, you can get this raw data, but who's going to place it and who's going to blend it together? It basically comes down to that, and you'll have Painter. We like I said, for 343 surfacing, it's not just texturing for environments. We do props, we do character stuff, and who's gonna help out make those textures that work well for those assets. It's not gonna it doesn't all come from scan data. Some of it does, some of it doesn't, but we have to know how it's being treated and how it's being put together.
What about so that's like, sorry, you've cut out, dude. You're cutting out. Give it a second. See if it comes back.
Oh.
You there? I think that might be it. I think you fixed. Oh no, you're still Mr. Robot.
Yeah.
Sorry about this. Yeah, look, dude, you're going very roboty right now.
Oh.
Is that better? This isn't good. Oh no, wait, I think it's fixed. It's fixed. It's good.
There it is. It's back. Yeah, I was seeing the little like MS thing. It went to like red. I was like, wait a minute, what's going on?
Discord's been terrible all day. It's been dropping out during meetings. That's cool.
Yeah, I mean, basically, as a surfacing artist, I don't think it's gonna go away because of megascans or scan in general. Because at the end, it's just like environment artists. Like, environment artists are not gonna go away because they have to make different kind of worlds that are in reality, and you can't scan, fantasy. You can't scan sci-fi. You cannot, really do that. You have to, build it out. Either in programs. So I mean, I guess if you are doing fantasy and sci-fi, you could make miniatures and then scan those, but that's a lot of labor. Which would be interesting. I've actually considered that. That's a tangent. I considered that for like some kind of like.
Have you seen who did it? I have seen someone take clay sculptures of like stylized props. I think it's a League of Legends map. It's a League of Legends map, I believe.
Exactly. I saw that on ArtStation as well. I saw somebody that was doing clay sculptures, scanning them, and then bringing the height map and stuff in Designer to finish it. I was like, that's pretty cool.
It's interesting to see where that will go. That's a weird little rabbit hole.
Yeah, exactly. And again, I think that's exactly the explorations we're going to see for scanning. I think that potentially we can have, worlds that look like claymation scanned through, and that's the artistic part of it. So I'm curious, and I'm really curious of where it's going to go, and what game is going to, kind of like make it feel different than just a Call of Duty or whatever, and be like, this is actually, we can do something really artistic with it, and that's fine. At the end, it's all about how you use the tools and the elements that you want and put it in, pretty basically cram it into the game, and then see how it all looks together.
Have you messed at all with something like Mixer or Alchemist, the sort of layer stack type materials?
Yeah, so Mixer, I remember that I didn't like use it, but I did see quite a bit of demos that came in, people coming into the studio and showing it, and I think it's interesting, but at the same time, it's almost like, at least for me personally, I feel it's too little, too late for the Quixel guys. I know that's gonna churn some people, but either way, I think it's a little too late for that stuff, because they're basically replicating a lot of the procedural stuff that's happening in Designer. Like, why would I want to go in there if I can just grab the assets and put them in Designer and get better blending techniques?
Oh, I
at the
see. So
same
you
time.
think it's a case of you like the idea where they're blending different height maps together to do stuff, but you don't see why you couldn't just blend them height maps within Designer. Okay.
Exactly. To me, it's like, well, I understand why they're using it, and it's their integration with Megascans is nice, but not everybody wants to use Megascans, for different reasons. So, they want to create their own library for scans and make their own assets, and they just do their own integration into Substance Designer or Painter.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. Actually, it's funny you say it that way because I hadn't actually thought of it like that. The fact that you could just grab all that height and scan data and stick it in Designer. And it comes back to what I was saying earlier, where like I feel anytime I import anything to Designer, like as a resource, I feel like I'm cheating, and it's a completely ridiculous way of thinking. But I think that's why I never came to think of it like that. You're right. Yeah, you could just take that height stuff and blend it much more efficiently. In Designer. Fair. Yeah. Very good point. I didn't think of that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I've definitely done in the past, here, and depending on the textures or direction I'm trying to push for the textures themselves, I've actually grabbed photo color textures and just laid a little bit of opacity on them on top of my procedural stuff, just to get a little bit of tooth of realism. So if I'm making a rock texture, I just go to textures.com and then get another rock texture and then bring in that color map, and then obviously take away the shadows and all that stuff, so it doesn't have that kind of contribution. It's just kind of like overlay it a little bit on the color and just kind of give it a little bit of that kind of photo treatment. I mean, I do it rarely, but occasionally I'm like, you know what, I can spend another day honing in this color map while I can just grab something from texture.com if I'm just trying to get something done really quick.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think a lot of material artists, I think, will reference textures.com for that, just because they can grab the albedo, just color gradient swipe where you drag over the thing, and you've got a load of color values which are pretty close to what you need.
Exactly.
I could that bit I don't feel bad about. I think it's only I only get anxious if I import it. If I'm referencing it, it ain't so bad.
Yeah. I mean, I still get that feeling a little bit, but less and less, especially when there's like deadlines around. I'm like, well, you know what? We just gotta get the job done.
Yeah, I think that's been what's been a kick up for me is okay. Now we've got a deadline. It's like, how do I get this done as quick as possible? I don't really care about my artistic integrity.
Exactly. Wish I could jump into that one texture that I did in Crazy Bump.
Yes. Now I need to know why.
So to put some context into that, I did make a lot of my textures in Crazy Bump for Tomb Raider.
Okay.
So I considered it Crazy Bump. Obviously, it's pretty crazy, but it's actually, if you know how to use it and you know how to layer stuff inside Photoshop, you can grab different passes, different normal information from Crazy Bump, because I wouldn't just get the vanilla normal that's generated there. I would tweak a couple different ones and then kind of blend it in.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Back in the day, that's kind of like kind of crazy, but either way, going to the latest one that I did. Let's see if I can find the picture of it. Is moss texture.
Moss.
So,
that's an interesting one to want to use Crazy Bump for.
So it's this one. So you see the moss in there. It's one of the levels. It's kind of like people are not seeing it because it's on chat, but basically it's one of the levels that I did for Lost Legacy. And we needed, we usually have like the Naughty Dog moss, right? That's like super green and very nice and lively. It's kind of like Disney green effect. But for this one, obviously it's kind of like a catacombs area or a ruins. We want a different kind of like lichen or moss. And at the end it was just like, okay, I can either go in Zbrush and or in Substance Designer and just try to generate a moss that's different for this. But then I was just like, you know what? We're gonna fly through this area really fast. It's a dark area, and I can probably just Crazy Bump this. So I just went to textures.com, grabbed a bunch of mosses, put it together, and then made my normal maps, my height maps, brought it all together, and then put it in. And then I showed it to my texture lead, and he's like, "Oh, I really like that moss. You should send that moss to everybody." I'm like, "I don't want to send it to everybody. That would be bad because it's a crazy bone texture." And he's like, "Oh God," he just stared at me.
That's fantastic. I love it.
Yeah, but he didn't know, so there you go. So it's just kind of funny to be like, yeah, I got the last crazy bump texture still. It's in the last Uncharted, game in there.
Fair play. I like that. That's fantastic.
Still lives.
That's a great story, dude.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to wrap up soon. I love talking to materials artists because it just flies through. It's been an hour already. I ask every guest. I don't know if you listened to any previous podcast, but ask every guest if you could go back to yourself at the beginning of your career. Especially you with all this experience now under your belt, would you say anything to them? Any advice?
Oh, you mean if I was talking to myself?
Towards yourself, towards 2018.
Don't go to county college.
Yes.
Avoid. Well, I mean, I'm actually a pro school because I did go to an art school, but I think I regret county college because I think it was a waste of my time for going to county college because obviously they trick you. They're like, hey, by the way, you can use your credits for whatever else school you want to go to later. I'm like, okay, it's cheaper to go here to get my English stuff done and whatever, right? And then I went to the actual school in New York City, SVA, and then none of that applied. So I wasted literally 2 years of my life just for county college. I mean, wasted is debatable because those classes were super easy for me. So I just kind of like made art on the side, and just those classes were just like, oh yeah, I'll just get it done.
Yeah, that's fair enough, dude. That's completely fair.
But yeah, that's probably the only thing. I mean, I enjoyed everything I did. I mean, I don't know if you know kind of like the full history of how I started, but I started, doing it through mods and stuff like that, and then eventually got picked up because of one mod that became a game called TAC Ops: Assault on Terror, and then that was an epic, an epic engine game. And then because that game was initially a mod of Unreal Tournament. It was Unreal Tournament. So it's kind of like the Counter-Strike version of for that community, right? So I made a couple maps for that, designer wise, and then once that became an actual game. Epic took notice of the people who worked on it, and they're like, "Hey, you want to work on Real Tournament 2004?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course." So that was my kind of like my first, I guess, or second official gig, and I did that when I think I was 19 or no 20. So yeah, I was 20, and I was a level designer back in the day. But it's interesting because I've seen enough of the industry that things change. So level design back in the day meant you're an environment artist, you're a texture artist, you're a lighter, you're a sound placer, you're a scripter, so you're doing all these things for one whole environment, right? Plus you're placing the paths for the AI and all that stuff. So you're kind of doing full on, the whole thing. And back in the day it was possible, but now it's completely ridiculous, right? To do that. So so I did a couple maps for them. I worked there for a year, and then I decided to go back to school at that point, because I didn't want to stay in level design, because I saw what was coming, basically the separation I saw the separation of environment art and level design happening. I was like, ooh, I want to be an environment art, but I'm not good enough to be there. So I saw that and I was like, okay, I need time. If I want to be, and I also at that time, back in the day at Epic, I was actually seeing the first development of like kind of high poly sculpting because of Gears of War. So I was seeing kind of the glimpse of Gears of War before anybody saw it, and my jaw was dropping constantly. Right, I was like, I want to do this, but I don't have the skills to do this. So
that's cool though. That you took the step to say, like, you're already in the industry. The fact that you decided to just go, you know what, I ain't good enough right now. I need to go get educated. Yeah, like that's a big step, man.
Yeah, and basically went back to school. Just decided that I'll use school for two reasons. For the classical knowledge that I need to have, obviously, but also, at the side, I'm going to do my own maps and textures and environments and stuff like that. And it's just practice, right? And by the time I got out of school, I had a pretty good portfolio that I can finally start selling myself. And I ended up working at first some VFX studios. Ended up working with Framestore at New York City, and then went from Framestore to a small studio called 4mm. That company no longer exists, but they were doing Def Jam Rap Star, and I did a bunch of UI stuff for that. Kind of like more like a concept for UI, because the UI was being made by like the actual UI artists and scripters, but I was doing kind of like the concept for UI and stuff like that with a small team, and then from that I was doing a few more projects on the side, and then I was like, okay, back in the day when I wasn't married to Charlene, but we're Charlene Lynn, but we're still dating, and we're just talking. It's like, well, where's her future? She's also an artist. Where's her future for art? And we decided that California would be a good place to go for us. So we started looking around what would be a good place to kind of start in, and Crystal Dynamics came up into it, and then basically that's history. I went to Crystal Dynamics, did 2 years at Crystal, amazing game with Tomb Raider. The crew was great. Went from kind of like an associate environment artist to a senior at that point, and then from that took several tests in the LA area, because I was looking around in LA after that, and then finally took that test for Naughty Dog, and then went to Naughty Dog and did my 6 years or so there. And then now I'm here at 343.
Damn, son. So you wouldn't change a thing. Literally, apart from that college thing, you've been there, done it, and seen a great deal of things, and it seems like it'd be a mistake to change anything.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't change anything for the world. Absolutely. The only thing is that would be like, probably don't take county college.
That's completely fair enough. I could understand that. But dude, we're gonna have to wrap up. I really appreciate you coming on. It's been great talking to you, because I know I've learned a shit ton.
Same.
So everyone is listening, if you're watching on YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, please like, follow, subscribe, share. All of this helps grow the podcast and helps people listen to the great stuff people like Rogelio has got to say. But we're gonna wrap up, dude. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks everybody for hearing. Bye.
Bye bye.